Okay, Mr. Chair, we are live on YouTube. We are recording. Brian will need a minute to share his screen. We do have 22 attendees in the meeting. So I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mrs. Rennick. Well, welcome everybody to the September 14th Planning Commission. John, can you cover the procedural rules per the governor's executive order on virtual meetings?
Sure can. Let me make sure can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. In response to the governor's executive order for conducting virtual meetings, this meeting is being recorded and also streaming live on RPA's YouTube channel. If you prefer to view the meeting that way, please see the chat box for the YouTube link that will be provided. As a part of this executive order from the governor, any votes must be by roll call, including a roll call vote to establish a quorum at the beginning of the meeting.
Thank you, John. Can you do a roll call for that quorum?
Sure. Commissioner Bankston.
Here.
Lyle Coker. Todd Lehman.
Here.
David Matthews.
Here.
Chris Mabey.
Here.
Jimmy Parks.
Here.
Okay. Barry Payne.
Here.
Okay. Blythe Bailey.
Here.
Councilman Ledford.
Here.
Thomas Palmer.
Here.
Mary Kay Hyatt.
Here.
Adam Verone. And Jason Farmer.
Here.
We have a quorum, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. All right, I want to cover a couple things in regards to this particular meeting starting this month, and for virtual meetings, attendees must register prior to today's meeting to speak. This information was provided to applicants and public stakeholders as part of the RPA's notification procedures. It is also posted on RPA's website. Displayed on your screen is a list of members who have signed up to speak for today's meeting, or that was displayed. There it is. All right, so John, just to clarify, if somebody's name is not on this list, then that means they're not speaking today. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And they had notification of that through the RPA's website and
Yes, we notified all the applicants as well. Yes.
okay, that's great.
Hey, John, forgive my
Yes, sir.
apologies. Councilman Oglesby has been trying to get on this list or get in if someone can reach out to him.
I will do.
Thank you.
All right. Mrs. Rennick, can you cover, and I'm assuming it's still relevant in regards to the chat meeting attendees?
We have chatted out to meeting attendees that for this meeting, the chat function has been disabled.
Got it.
So if they signed up in advance, the list there, we will, as mentioned in the chat to them, we will call their name, unmute their mic, bring them into the meeting so they're able to speak to Planning Commission. And we provided some contact information if there's a question after the meeting about anything they can follow up with staff after the meeting.
Okay, that's great. All right, everybody, I apologize in advance because I do have a script here that I'm going to read just through. So for those of you who want to take a nap, I'll just wake you up when I get done. So Barry, you can just turn off your video there and take a nap. As part of my opening remarks, I will note our typical procedure for a review of each case item, but highlight some of the differences due to this virtual meeting format. Planning commissioners have received the staff reports for the cases on today's agenda and have had time to review these cases. And the information prior to this meeting, we will use the following procedure for cases. For each case with a recommendation to approve or approve with conditions, I will ask staff if anyone has notified staff that they would like to speak in opposition to the case or to the conditions. If there's no one, unless a PC member requests a staff presentation, we will proceed to a roll call vote. For staff recommendations to deny or for cases with registered speakers, we will start with a staff presentation. Following the staff presentation, if there are no questions from PC members, I'll ask for the applicant to be recognized. The staff person will move the registered speaker into this forum with the Planning Commission, unmuting them and allowing them to speak. If for some reason your name is called and staff does not unmute you, I don't know. We'll give it a minute because Karen, they're not going to have the ability to notify us through the text or the chat box, right?
I think we'll ask for them to raise their hand because right now I see names for everyone that
Okay.
just trying to check up to speak, but we'll probably ask for them to raise their hand if their name's called, if they can raise their hand in the chat function, and we'll
Okay.
try that way.
Okay. The applicant will have 7 minutes to present their request. Please note that there will be a time clock displayed on the screen that will keep track of your remaining time. If there's any opposition, you will have a total of 9 minutes. If there are multiple speakers for opposition, I may ask you to wrap up your remarks so that others may speak. The applicant will have 2 minutes to respond. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the audience or the applicant. Once Planning Commission takes action, if you have any questions, please put your question and contact information in an email to staff, and they'll follow up with you in the next several days. Note that for most requests other than subdivisions, Planning Commission makes a recommendation and final action on the request is taken by the local council or commission the following month, allowing another opportunity for input. Staff will post next meeting dates on cases in the chat box. We will now proceed with today's agenda.
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian. I want to update, with your permission, Planning Commission on some items that have officially been withdrawn and are noted as such on your agenda. We also have 3 requests to also withdraw cases that did not meet the deadline. So if it's your permission, we can go ahead and act on those, or Planning Commission can act on those if you so choose. But the 3 that have been officially withdrawn that met the deadline were case 2020-101 for 2390 Jenkins Road. That case has been withdrawn.
Hey, what item is it in our agenda?
Sorry, number 7.
7.
Under new business.
Got it.
Items number 16 and 17, which are case 2020-111 and 2020-1112, have been withdrawn, and there's no action required by Planning Commission.
Okay.
I did receive 3 requests this morning to withdraw cases, but because they're on the agenda and did not meet the deadline, Planning Commission needs to act. I don't know if you want to take those right now or just wait till they come up on the agenda.
Hey, Karen, are you aware of what these cases are already?
Yes.
And is there any opposition to any of these cases?
We did have one of the cases where there was opposition, which is number 2020-105.
And 2020-83 opposition.
I mean, are they registered to speak here?
Yes.
Okay.
One person for 83, I think it was just checking to make sure that case was in fact withdrawn as understood it was going to be.
Okay, so on 2020-83, which is
Number 3.
Number 3 under old business.
Okay. And what else?
And number 11, which is case 2020-105 at 4503 Oakwood Drive. He's requested to withdraw that case. And item number 12, which is case 2020-107 at 6026 East Brainerd Road.
okay. All right. So I'm gonna move those to the top of the agenda if I could. And regarding case 2020-0083, which is located at 6900 block of Concord Circle. Karen, was there any registered speakers in opposition?
For number 83, we have just someone interested and I think wants to speak only if the case isn't withdrawn.
Okay, so for commission's sake, we have the applicant requesting to withdraw it. I would entertain a motion.
Move to withdraw.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and it has been properly seconded to allow the applicant to withdraw the case. Is there any discussion?
Did the applicant want to withdraw or defer?
Withdraw.
Okay.
Any further discussion? All right. John, are you taking the roll call vote for us?
Yes, sir. Ready when you are.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Okay, Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Payne,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Bailey. Okay, Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt, Farmer.
Yes.
Passes.
All right. And Brian, I think the next case where the applicant was asking to withdraw was item 11 on our agenda, and that's 2020-0105.
That is correct.
And that's located at 4503 Oakwood Drive. I'd entertain a motion to allow that.
Move to withdraw.
Second.
We have a motion from Dave Matthews and a second from Councilman Ledford. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker, Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford. Okay, Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. And Karen, regarding case 2020-0107, there is somebody that's wishing to speak in regards.
There is
to
no
this?
one here from 107 that wants to, we didn't have anyone sign up in advance
Okay,
for that case.
that's
Move to
great.
withdraw.
Move to second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion to withdraw, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bankston,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey, Ledford,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right, Brian, have I covered everything?
You have.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for your help with that. All right, back to the top of our agenda, which is subdivision plats and variances. And this is item 1, and it's SD 2020-0030. This is a preliminary plat for Waterstone Ridge subdivision on Webb Road, Phase 2, lots 54 through 70, 137 through 149, and 151 through 152. Karen, is there any opposition?
We,
Mr. Chairman, this is Brian. We do have the applicant who would like to speak to one of the notes in the staff report on this subdivision plat.
Okay.
and we do have someone in opposition, and I see them in attendance.
Okay, so before we jump into this, Brian, you've done a great job of explaining it in the past. And I think it's really helpful for people who wish to speak in opposition in regards to plats, kind of what we're doing here and what that means, you know, so can you
Yeah.
explain that?
Sure. Preliminary plat.
I'm sorry, Brian, I'm going to interrupt. I think I have that incorrect it's the first zoning case. Unless you see differently, we do not have anyone here in opposition. I apologize.
Yes.
I
There should not be
misread.
any.
I had it marked wrong. So we do not have anyone here. So forget that comment. Excuse me, Mr. Chair.
That's great.
Okay. But we do have the applicant who wishes to speak to one of the notes.
Sure. So let's hear from, who's the applicant?
Mike Price,
Can we
MFP
hear from
engineer.
Mr. Price?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. This is basically a preliminary plat. In the subregs, section 401.1.4 of the subregs requires that arrangements of streets in new subdivisions shall provide for the continuation of existing, proposed, or platted streets in adjoining areas where feasible. And as you note on the screen here, the area in red is an existing city road called Eller Road. It basically dead ends into this proposed subdivision. Per section I just read, staff is recommending that this connection be provided to Eller Road from this subdivision. I think the applicant wishes to address that requirement.
Brian, I've got a question real quick. And maybe some other folks are thinking it. On most plats, we're seeing most preliminary plats, do they have this condition? Have we seen this in the past?
It's not a condition. It's just it's a requirement of the subregs. It wasn't clear. This came in as a PUD. The applicant stated during the discussion of the PUD that would have one connection to Webb Road. So there's some communication on what does that mean. They shouldn't provide this secondary connection to Eller Road. Per the subregs and per CDOT's review, we're requiring that connection be made. It's not a condition. So you as a planning commission can either waive that requirement or require that connection.
Okay, thank you. We'll hear from Mr. Price.
Thank you. Can you hear me, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission?
We can hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. So this site came before the Planning Commission within the last year when it was approved as a planned unit development. And during the presentation, it was stated that Waterstone Drive would be the sole access for approximately 100 lots to be developed in this subdivision. So we submitted plans and this plat to the RPA, and CDOT came back with the requirement to tie to Eller Road. So Eller Road currently is a dead-end street. It is a substandard city road. And I will state that the price point of the homes here on Eller Road, which is a sort of a more rural condition, does not match up and is congruent with our development, where we have very tightly smaller lots that houses are 10 feet apart, and that's definitely a different situation than what's going on with Eller Road. So we would ask that this condition be waived, as our PUD plan, when it went to the zoning, clearly only showed one access, and that by constructing this, it will create a little bit of a financial hardship because it will lose a lot. It will also create some issues for us from a drainage standpoint. As you can see, just above the circle there is so you see some contour lines that are right there where that arrow is showing. That's where our detention pond is located. So given that, we would just ask that there's not a need for another access point given the number of lots that we have and our direct access basically that comes out onto Webb Road. And if there's any questions, be happy to answer those.
Mr. Chair, I think you're muted.
I'll repeat myself. Mike, I've got a question for you. The Eller Road, what road does it go out onto?
Eventually, it comes back out to Webb Road as well.
Okay. You said as well?
As well. It circles back around and comes back out to Webb Road to the southwest there.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman?
So both roads go to Webb Road, right?
Yes, sir.
I mean, that's Waterstone Drive, and it goes out onto Webb Road, and then Eller Road goes out onto Webb Road as well?
It eventually connects out, yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Mr. Payne?
I was just going to say, to me, this is I would expect that the people on Elder Road probably would not want the additional traffic. And I think that the people in this subdivision would be happier with a one-way in, one-way out. For that reason, if it's appropriate, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the plat with the words provide connection to Eller Road be stricken.
Second.
Motion.
So we have a motion and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. May I still make a comment?
Absolutely.
Hey, I just wanted to add a couple of things, and I knew this was going to come back, and I knew that my fellow commissioners would vote on it. I know that many of my fellow commissioners don't the same way about multiple connections, but I just wanted to say a couple of things that Mr. Price didn't mention. Firstly, if I understand correctly, and Mr. Schultz can correct me if I'm wrong, we felt like this was a minor modification that did not require that the PUD come back. That seems relevant because when Mr. Schultz and I discussed it, it seemed like that was within our realm to enforce that requirement, even though it wasn't shown in the PUD. Number one. Number two, we had a tornado back in April that I know personally, relatives and friends were caught in their neighborhoods because they only had one way in and one way out. The creation of neighborhoods with only one way in and one way out presents a number of problems, not the least of which is access during an emergency. And number three, to Mr. Price's point, Eller Road is small, and also to your point, Commissioner Payne, I can imagine that folks on Eller Road may not want this additional traffic. I would also imagine folks on Waterstone Road don't want the additional traffic. The fact of the matter is these are public streets and they're intended to be used by everybody. And the last point that we felt like was important, again, the subdivision regs clearly state that if feasible, there is a public right-of-way that dead ends into this property. I don't think we can make the argument that it's not feasible to connect to it. And I also believe that creating a connection to Eller Road makes it more possible that folks could use alternate modes of transportation. If you look at a map, if we are only tying this neighborhood into Webb Road, it becomes likely impossible that anyone could ever access their homes without using a car. Because I don't think any of us in our right mind would ever choose to walk or bike down Webb Road in its current condition. So with that being said, I certainly understand that not all the commissioners agree with me, but I'm going to be voting against the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. So we do have a motion that was properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston,
Yes.
Lehman,
No.
Matthews,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
No.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey,
No.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
No.
Hyatt,
No.
Farmer.
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to give you a count. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for, and 5 against. So,
Coker.
Chairman,
Coker's here.
Coker.
Yes.
Okay, that makes it 6-5 to approve.
All right, motion carries. All right, next case on the agenda under old business is case 2020-0027. And this is located at 7437, 43, and 45 Shalford Road and 2301 Rivendell Lane. And this is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone and RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone to C2 convenience commercial zone and RTZ residential townhouse 0 lot line zone. And staff has recommended to deny the applicant's request and approve other. This was deferred from July. Karen, I'm sure the applicant would like to speak, but is there anybody else that is wishing to speak on this case?
Mr. Chairman, we do have, oh, sorry, Karen, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, we do have someone in opposition, and I do see them in the attendee list.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I think Commissioner Ledford said this case actually might be asking for a deferral.
Yes, Brian, if you'll look for the applicant, I believe it's Guy Cherownook. And since we do have opposition, I just want people to know that we are probably going to be asking for, I will be asking for that deferral This project is not yet complete. COVID has not been kind to us when able to work through some issues, but I think we're getting closer. And the developer has agreed to further this conversation to address citizens' concerns, especially coming from the Preston Circle area.
With that understanding, I think I also understood there to be some opposition. Is that right, Karen?
We do have opposition.
Okay. But for the sake of time, I'd like to hear from the applicant, and all I want to understand is whether or not they actually want to defer and how long this needs to be deferred for.
Okay. Mr. Cherwinuk has been brought into the meeting and he might need to unmute himself. Mr.
Hi.
Cherwinuk?
Yeah, this is Guy Cherwinuk at Paces Ferry Builders. Can you hear me?
We can, yes.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner and Board. Yes, we are asking for a 30-day deferral. I have spoken with Mr. Ledford, and he understands where we are. A good part of our site is retail. That's part of the reason, in order for us to kind of regroup and see where we are. We are continually working with the neighbors. We have 90% of the neighbors that are contiguous that have signed written agreements supporting our project, but we do have a lot more work to do with the Preston Circle group, and we will continue to do that with Ledford's help.
Thank you, Guy. One thing real quick, so we deferred this previously from July, and here we are in September, and the work that you thought was going to be done wasn't done, and so certainly we can understand that. Are you going to be complete with all of this work in the next 30 days such that we can rule on it next time we see it?
That's our goal. We don't want to continue to defer, and our plan would be to have it have it ready for a decision of it.
Well, I guess what I'm looking for is some more confidence, because
yes, we're going to be ready for a ruling in 30 days.
Okay, so when we see this again, we're not going to be asked to defer it again.
That's correct.
Mr. Chairman, just to clear up the record, this was supposed to be heard in April, then was deferred because we didn't have April meeting. It was actually deferred from the May meeting. So it's been several months deferred.
Okay. Yeah, all the more reason why when we see it again, we're going to take action on it, up or down. We've got the applicant requesting to defer it for 30 days, which would be our October meeting. What's the will of the commission?
I'll go ahead and make the motion, but do we want to go ahead and listen to what the opposition has to say, or are you interested in moving this along with the deferral?
I'm most interested in just moving along with the deferral.
Okay. Then I move to defer 30 days.
Second.
We have a motion to defer for 30 days, and it has been properly seconded. I was just going to say, if we were meeting in person and somebody had gotten in their car and driven down to the courthouse, I'd feel a little bit more obliged to make sure we hear from them. But in this case, I think it's relatively easy for people to attend, and it's early in our agenda. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Langston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Baby,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
yes,
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on our agenda is case 2020-0082, and this is Cedar Hill Development Company asking for a rezoning from R1 to R3, and this is located at 4604 and 4700 block of 13th Avenue, and 4605, 4607 of 14th Avenue. And this case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. It was deferred from July. Mr. Bridger, can you remind us why we deferred that?
Yes, I can, John, come to. This is deferred because, at that time we had talked about amending the RTZ zone. The applicant wanted to wait to see what happened on that RTZ amendment. I will go ahead and update the Planning Commission right now quickly. The RTZ amendment we proposed and Planning Commission recommended to approve last month did not pass at City Council. So it was denied. So the applicant in this case wishes to move forward with R3 as requested.
All right, and Mrs. Rennick, is there anybody in opposition?
We have no one in opposition.
Okay. Mr. Schultz, can you elaborate, or maybe Commissioner Ledford can, on why our recommendation regarding RTZ was not approved at council so that we can better make recommendations in the future? Because, yeah.
Good question.
I'd be happy. My understanding was that, and I talked to Councilman Mitchell. I think, as I understand it, he had a meeting with some of his constituents, and some of them were concerned that the change was on behalf of a particular developer. I think it was something he shared at council, and then based on that, council did not, basically I think there's a lack of a second for a motion, and therefore it kind of died on the floor. And talking with Councilman Mitchell, my understanding, talking with him, was that he did not necessarily think for the rest of the council to deny it. It was just his particular decision for his district. That's something I shared with Councilman Ledford. I don't know, Ledford, did you want to add anything to that?
So yeah, obviously being mayor, I think what Councilman Mitchell had alluded to was something that nobody would want to be a part of. And that was a probably leveling a little bit of an accusation on favoritism towards a developer, which is what's leveled, and that put a lot of question into a lot of council members' minds instantly, and that is the reason the vote went the way it was.
Okay.
Other than that, other than that, that's exactly what happened.
Okay.
It was brought with great conviction.
Okay. All right, well, we've got this case in front of us, and we've got the staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Mr. Schultz, can you?
Yes, there's only one condition. That condition is limited to 29 detached single unit residential structures only. And that's based on the site plan that was submitted with the application. I think the applicant's intending to do a HPR.
All right.
That's why they need the R3.
And is the applicant, Brian, is the applicant, or they agree with the staff recommendation? That's
my understanding. Yes, they did several months ago. Then they heard about the RTZ amendment. They wanted to maybe think about that instead of doing the HPR. And now that the RTZ is sort of up in the air, they would like to move forward.
Is the applicant here where we can ask them if they approve of the staff recommendation?
Do you have a minute? They are.
I do not see Jay Martin in the list. If he could raise his virtual hand, but I do not see him in the list of people on the call or in the meeting.
Joe in our office had reached out to them last week and advised them of the situation, and they had told him they just preferred to move forward.
Motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Second. We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston?
Yes.
Coker? Coker?
Yes.
Lehman?
Yes.
Matthews?
Aye.
Maybe?
Aye.
Parks?
Yes.
Payne?
Yes.
Bailey? Bailey?
Yes, sorry.
Ledford?
Yes.
Palmer?
Yes.
Hyatt?
yes,
Farmer?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is under new business. mandatory referral 2020-0095, and this is located at the 5400 and 5500 blocks of Kentucky Avenue and 5500 block of Iowa Avenue. And this is for a right-of-way abandonment. Karen, is there any opposition present?
There is no opposition.
Move to approve.
Second.
We do have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. Why do we not have a staff recommendation on this? Or do we, and I'm just missing it?
We do, it's approved.
Okay, all right, that's great. We have a motion and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Langston,
Yes.
Pelzer,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Maybe,
Aye.
Parks,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, next case on the agenda is case 2020-0096. And this is located at 4440, 4452 Bird Avenue and 3917 Lightfoot Mill Road. And this is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone. This case has a staff recommendation to deny. Karen, is the applicant present?
Applicant is present, as is someone in opposition, and I see both of them in the meeting.
Okay, we'll hear first from Mr. Schultz and the
Mr. Chair,
applicant in opposition. I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Chair, can you look for Councilman Russell Gilbert, please? And also-
Councilman Gilbert is in the meeting and he's got his hand raised. I am able to access him.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, this is a request to rezone from R1 residential zone to R2 residential zone. Purpose is 2-family dwellings. The total combined acreage is 1.5. Proposed number of units is 6 with a density of 4 dwelling units per acre. It's located at 3917 Lightfoot Mill and 4440 and 4452 Bird Avenue, just to the south of Highway 58 and Bonnie Oaks. Here's a view of the site, aerial view of the site. It's highlighted in the yellow on your screen. Lightfoot Mill to the right, Bird's Avenue to the north. Here's a view of the single family home across the street from Bird Avenue. A view looking west on Bird Avenue, site's just on the left-hand side. This is a view east along Bird Avenue at the Lightfoot Mill intersection. The site is on the right-hand side. This is a view east along Lightfoot Mill Road, single family dwellings. And this is a view south of the site along Lightfoot Mill Road. You can see it's single family dwellings. It's currently zoned R1. To the north, south, and west is R1 residential. To the east across Lightfoot Mill is R2, and then further east is M1. If you go further north along Lightfoot Mill, there's commercial at Bonnie Oaks and Lightfoot Mill. But generally on this side of Lightfoot Mill, it's all R1 residential. There is no zoning history on this site or nearby. This piece of property is currently vacant. To the north, south, and west is all single family detached dwellings. To the east, across Lightfoot Mill, is warehousing and single family detached dwellings. This is in the Highway 58 community plan, which was adopted in 2002. That plan recommends low density residential, which is primarily single family detached dwellings with a density of 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. Staff recommendation again is to deny based on the following. The request is not compatible with the Highway 58 community plan because that plan recommends single family detached uses only. It's also important to note that this area falls within Area 10 plan, which will begin the public planning process this fall. During that process, the public will have the opportunity to provide comments on the future development of this area and will establish a new land use policy recommendation. So based on non-compliance with the plan and a future plan coming on board this fall, staff recommended to deny this request.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Can we bring the applicant on?
Ms. Galas, you're in the meeting and should be able to speak.
We plan to develop and put duplexes on these 3 lots and with the feeling of single family housing. So we thought it will be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Okay. Anything else, ma'am?
No, thank you.
Okay. Karen, can we bring the opposition, or I think you mentioned somebody was in opposition, right?
We do have someone in opposition. We have Councilman Gilbert, and I am Councilman Gilbert. You're in the meeting and should be able to speak, but you may need to unmute the mic on your end.
Is it on mute now?
We can hear you, yes.
Okay, Russell Gilbert, District 5. I spoke with Cherokee Wood Association, and they do not want to give a rezoning to a R2. This is most all single family homes, as you noticed. This is an older community, and they do not want to change what they have invested in their livelihood.
All right. Thank you, Councilman Gilbert. And was there somebody else who wanted to speak?
That's it.
Okay. All right. And then I guess we bring the applicant back on.
Okay, give me just 1 minute to. Okay, the applicant's back in the meeting.
Ma'am, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so what you're asking to do is to build duplexes on these properties, and the current zone only allows single family homes. And the neighborhood is, based on the report that Councilman Gilbert has given us, is in opposition to you building duplexes there. And, but you can, however, build single family detached houses there. I want to give you the opportunity to respond to that.
That's okay.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Chair, I move to deny.
Okay.
Second.
We do have a motion to deny, and it has been properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston,
Yes.
Coker,
Yes.
Lehman,
Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Parkers, Clark, sorry, Clark,
Aye.
Payne,
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Yes.
Hyatt,
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0097. And this is located at the 1700 block of Green Hill Road and is for right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to deny the applicant's request and approve other. Mr. Schultz?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, also, we had received a letter in opposition this morning. They didn't sign up to speak. They missed the deadline. So when that comes time, I'll be glad to read their email response. But this,
Brian, Mr. Chair, we have a note that the applicant is having is trying to log into the meeting. So I don't believe the applicant's present yet. So I'm just going to ask Joe, is the applicant present yet? Are you aware? So I don't
believe so. I'm emailing back and forth with Trina in the office who's talking with the applicant.
Okay. We encouraged her to call in if she was not able to log in by Zoom, but just to let you know, Mr. Chair, right now we don't have the applicant for the case present in the meeting.
Okay, well, for the sake of everybody's time, I'm just going to bump that to later in the agenda. We'll pick it up later. Next case on the agenda is 2020-0098. And this is located at 6340 Middle Valley Road. And this is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to RT1 residential zone. In this case, has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Karen, is there any opposition present?
We don't have any opposition for this case.
Okay. And is the applicant present?
I'm not seeing the applicant right off in the list. If she could raise her virtual hand to help me find her. Okay, we do have her. Yes, thank you. The applicant is present, Mr. Chair.
Okay, can we pull the applicant?
Yes. Ms. Walker, you're in the meeting. You should be able to speak.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, yes, thank you.
Hey, Ms. Walker, this is Chairman Collier. Are you familiar with these conditions that staff has recommended in regards to this case?
I have read the report and I do like the approval, but I did have some questions about the conditions.
What are they specifically?
The conditions, I think it's really relating to my site plan that I turned in, that I drew by myself, and it says maximum 4 dwelling units per acre and townhome uses only on one parcel of the, there are 3 different parcels. So as I drew it, you can see that the structures are only on the one parcel.
Right.
Mr. Chairman, staff was comfortable with the RT1 at this location. The Hickson North River plan does have a density cap of between 1 to 4 dwelling units per acre. That's where the maximum 4 dwelling units per acre came from as a condition, try to be more in line with the Hickson North River area plan. Also, condition number 2 of keeping those townhomes only on that parcel was another attempt at separating those more intense uses away from the R1 to the south. That was sort of staff's thoughts on the conditions.
Do you know, Brian, if the 4 units per acre would allow what's drawn?
No, it would not. It would allow about 8. She's showing 12, which is at 6 dwelling units per acre.
Got it. All right. Mrs. Walker, I'm going to go back to Mr. Schultz and let him do his entire staff report, and then we'll circle back to you.
Okay. Yeah, this is a request to rezone from R1 to RT1 residential townhouse zone on Miller Valley Road. Proposed use is townhouse development. It's approximately 2 acres in size. Proposed number of units is 12 with a density of 6 dwelling units per acre. It's located at 6340 Middle Valley Road. You can see on the screen just to the north is Lower Mill Road. Middle Valley is to the left, going towards Hickson Pike. This is a view of the site looking for Middle Valley. This is a view south of the site along Middle Valley Road. You can see it's single family dwellings. This is a view west of the site across Middle Valley Road. This is a view north of the site along Middle Valley Road. And just to give you another perspective, aerial view to the right of the screen, the Middle Valley is to the south, and going right is going towards Hickson Pike. Go back to that. And to the north or to the west is Middle Valley and Shelby Circle. Shelby Circle is the city county line, so everything west of Shelby Circle on this map is in the county. This is currently zoned R1. To the south is R1, to the west is R1 and R4. To the north at the intersection of Shelby and Miller Valley, there is an existing R4 zone that has no conditions. Then you have R1 as well to the north. In 1984, that little R4 at the intersection of Middle Valley was rezoned from R1 to R4. There are no conditions on that R4. And then in 2019, with the green arrows pointing, we had a request to rezone the remainder of that property from R1 to R4. Staff recommended to deny the R4 but approve R3. That application, there was opposition at City Council, ultimately withdrawn at City Council, so it's remained R1. This is a single family dwelling on the property. To the north is warehousing, multifamily and vacant land. To the south, west, and east are single family detached dwellings. And then further south along Middle Valley is office/warehousing. This is in the Hickson Community Land Use Plan, which was adopted in 2005. That recommendation is low density residential, which is primarily single family detached dwellings. Townhomes are permitted if the density is compatible. One of the goals identified in the Hickson North River Plan is to create younger home ownership and senior housing opportunities. This request, while slightly more dense than the adjacent low density residential, does provide a diversity of housing choice and stock in the area as supported by the plan. There are no environmental features in terms of steep slopes or floodplains on the property. So staff recommend to approve with conditions. The proposed single family attached dwellings or townhomes is a housing type that is compatible with the recommended land use plan recommendations. The request is compatible with adjacent land uses and developmental form. And in order to provide an adequate transition from the R4 zone to the north to the R1 zone to the south, staff felt or conditions should be applied. Again, that was limiting the density to 4 dwelling units per acre, more in line with the recommendations of the Hickson North River Plan, and limit townhome development only on parcel 091/084-01. Again, that is to keep those parcels more to the north and away from the R1 to the south. And here's the site plan that was submitted.
I've got a quick question, and I'll open it up for any other commissioners who've got questions from staff. And maybe this is a question for all of staff, not just you, Brian, but is it possible that sometimes an area plan conflicts or sends conflicting messages? Because, you know, suggesting that townhomes could be, and I'm just going to make a broad statement, and then I'm fine with being wrong. I'm wrong all the time, but suggesting townhomes would be suitable, and then also suggesting a density cap of 4 units per acre seem like conflicting standards. You don't build townhomes if your density cap is 4 units per acre. So it seems like those two conflict each other. Either the density cap is wrong and there should not be a 4 unit, I mean, that's lower than our R1 density cap, or this should not be townhomes, one or the other, but it can't be both or that. So maybe just help me understand.
Yeah, maybe John can help if I say this wrong, but I think what staff was looking at was, yeah, this is an older plan. It's what, 15 plus years old. And the policy at that time was, you know, low density, 1 to 4 dwelling units. And it did have a goal of providing a different type of housing stock. And so we were being conservative in our condition to 4 dwelling units per acre. Now, if you as a planning commission want to sort of establish a new policy, because we don't have a land use plan that's updated in this area, that's sort of what we were thinking, that you as a planning commission, through the public hearing, like we've done in the past, sort of establish a new policy per se, absent a new land use plan update. I'm not sure when this plan is coming on board. Maybe John can answer that.
Hey, Brian, before John starts jumping in there, would R1 zoning have a density cap?
It's usually 4 to 5 straight R1ing based on the minimum lot size.
Mm-hmm. And then in order for this to be what's been proposed, in order for it to work, it would have to be 6 units per acre.
She's showing 12 units, a total of 2 acres for the entire site. So she's at 2 units per acre.
6.
Oh, sorry, 6, yeah, 2.
Okay. Mr. Bridger, did you have anything?
Yeah, all I would add to what Brian said was that I think the key operative word of density is compatible. And I think that's kind of what we use it. I think to your point, I think, you know, there's an argument to be made that maybe that's changed since when this plan was originally adopted. But, you know, like as always, we try to be careful when we make a modification to what was already approved as policy. I think clearly it's within the prerogative of Planning Commission to ask those questions. I mean, clearly we see a need for more variety of housing types. So, I mean, clearly, as you can tell, we're recommending approval with that condition. I think that's a fair discussion for the commission to have, is do you want to provide a cap or not?
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Matthews.
Yes, this question is for John, I believe. There is RT1 already there, just on the other side of Shelby Circle on the north of there. What is the density there?
I don't know that off the top of my head. I mean,
I don't either.
Brian?
I don't, off the top of my head, I don't think it's in the staff report. The adjacent residential density was around 3 dwelling units per acre. I don't know if it captured the RT to the north. I assume it just captured everything through here because these are large lots.
Okay, and then the R4 adjacent, there's no cap on any density there?
No, that's what staff was looking at. That R4 setting here has no conditions. And that's why staff felt RT1 was more of appropriate as a transition, keeping everything at this node, if you will, and sort of protecting this R1 by limiting the density and limiting the uses to this parcel here.
Well, yeah, you know, with that said, it seems to me like this area does need to be maybe studied, but I think, as I recall, that the density of north of Shelby is very high. I think I even did that years ago, but I can't recall myself. I'm inclined to approve the request, and that would be my motion.
All right, so we do have
Second.
Just to be clear, Chairman, if you get that with or without any conditions, just to be clear for the record.
That's without condition.
Second. I have a question. What's the maximum density for RT1?
Unlike the RTZ, it has a max density. It's pretty high. Let me go back and calculate it. RT1 has a minimum lot size of let's see.
RT1's 18.
I was going to say it's probably around 16 or 18 units an acre.
Yeah, it's 1350 per unit. So you're looking at 1350. That's about 32.
Okay, so we do have a motion that has been properly seconded, and that is to approve this request with no conditions. I do have one other question. Why the staff recommendation to only allow development on the one parcel as opposed to both parcels?
Again, that was trying to keep protect this R1 to the south, this single family dwelling, shift everything to the north closer to that intersection, and to serve as a buffer between the R4 and this R1. So we thought, based on the site plan where she drew the structures, to keep everything shifted to the north was the thought.
Okay. All right, any other discussion?
May I ask a question?
Yeah, Mr. Bailey.
I didn't catch this. Forgive me if you said it, Mr. Schultz, but I didn't see in the staff report, and I don't understand what the R4 special zone is for. Is there any context there that might help shed light on this case?
It was zoned in 84. Originally wanted commercial for that intersection. Staff recommended to deny the C2 and go R4 because R4 was probably a less intense zone back in 84 at that time. It is now as well. So it was less intense because you're right on the county border, city limits. So that was why it was R4. Nothing's been developed, has no conditions on it. So it's a wide open R4 zone setting there.
Well, I think isn't it actually an R4 special? Isn't that why it's hatched? And what does the special refer to?
Well, the special is just the name of the zone. It's just, it doesn't, like you have R1 residential zone, the R4 is just a special zone. I'm not sure why that's hatched. It just showed up on our ZIM system. There is no special permit or anything on that property. It just shows up. We have no way to get rid of that cross hatching, but it is R4 and R1 to the north.
Well, I have one more question. I'm on the fence here. I don't disagree. In fact, I think I agree with Mr. Matthews about maybe wondering why or maybe it was Mr. Collier that started it about wondering why the cap. I understand the intention. I'm a little worried with any sort of condition, and I normally don't advocate for conditions, but can you tell me on a 2-acre site, how many units could they put here if there was no condition and we went to RT1?
Well,
two.
I mean,
Mr. Chairman, is that, I'm sorry, am I out of line or is that?
No, I think that's a good question.
Okay.
Well, just using the overall 2 acres and based on the minimum lot size in the RT1, I get about 64 units, and that's just on gross, probably less.
If it helps any, I was going to suggest a modification to the amendment with some density in there. I'm inclined to suggest more than the applicant has, but way less than what is provided, somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 units an acre, which in my mind makes sense for townhouses. And I would make an amendment to that motion if Mr. Matthews would accept.
I do accept that.
Mr. Chairman, I'll third that because I've talked to Councilman Smith and I do expect quite a bit of opposition if we go full on density. So I think that was a good compromise.
Okay. All right, so we have an amended motion and it has been seconded. Any other discussion? And Karen, just to make sure I've covered my bases, we've heard from the applicant, it was pretty brief, but I can't imagine that they have a problem with what we're doing here. Not that it would necessarily matter, but was there any opposition?
There is no opposition.
Okay. All right. Just because I think it's the right thing to do, we didn't really give the applicant an opportunity to talk. So I do need to make sure we hear from the applicant, and if Ms. Walker could come back on the line and I can explain where we're at and just make sure.
Yes, I'm here. I've been listening.
Okay, and so no comment is an okay thing to say, but I just wanted to make sure that you'd heard it all and understood what it is that was on the floor.
I do understand the density conversations, and yeah, I'm happy with that. Would that be a condition? You would change the condition of that maximum?
The current motion is that there would be a maximum of, Mr. Farmer, was it 12 units per acre?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And the second condition?
There wouldn't be a second condition.
Okay.
Just the one. Now, we're a recommending body and this is going to go before City Council. And so I would suggest that, maybe there's some follow-up with some of the individuals that serve on council, just to let you know, this will go on to council. But with that being said, we have a motion for an amended motion, and it was seconded with the one condition that there be a maximum density of 12 units per acre. And that was seconded, and there's no further discussion, correct? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Park. Payne.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Mr. Maybe.
Mr. Bridger, I believe you've missed me the last couple of times, but
Oh, my bad.
I would go along with how we voted either way.
No. That's I appreciate you. You know what I did is I ran out of room out of the notebook. I copied a list of names of there. I appreciate you giving me a heads up. I'll add you to the list, sir. Thank you.
Miss mine too, John.
Parks?
Yeah.
I thought, okay. All right. My apologies.
Yeah.
Got them added.
I think what's happening, it's kind of sticking. It doesn't come all the way through sometimes.
Okay. I'll slow down a little bit. I was just trying to I'll slow down a little more as I go through each name.
Okay.
All right. Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 20. Well, you know what, Karen, is our applicant for 1700 block of Green Hill Road back with us,
Yes, Ms. Tony should be in the meeting on the phone. And we don't have any opposition to that case.
Okay, but just to remind everybody, this is mandatory referral 2020-0097. This is 1700 block at Green Hill Road. This is a right-of-way abandonment and has a staff recommendation to deny the applicant's request and approve another. Ms. Rennick, can you pull the applicant on the line so I can ask one quick?
Yes, Ms. Tony, you are in the meeting and should be able to speak. Are you able to hear us and speak?
Mr. Chairman, we do have opposition later. They're not in the meeting today. We do have opposition later.
Ms. Tony, I have you in the meeting, and on my end, it shows you're muted.
All right, well, let's just, we'll try again later.
Okay.
We'll move on to the fifth item on our agenda is case 2020-0099, and this is located at 7641 Austin Drive. And this is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone to R5 residential zone. This has a staff recommendation to approve. And if there's no opposition present.
Move to approve.
Second.
I'm not aware of any opposition.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Mr. Bridger, can you take a roll call?
Yes, sir.
Start with Chris.
Aye.
Wow. Okay, we get started, guys. Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Thank you, sir. Bailey.
Yes. Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0100, and this is located at 1912 South Willow Street and is an application to lift conditions of ordinance 10566 and 12134. And it has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Ms. Rennick, can you pull the applicant on to our meeting?
Yes. Mr. McCormick?
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any opposition on this case either.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Mr. McCormick, can you hear us?
I see him in the meeting and I'm trying to bring him in. Let's see here. I am not having good luck allowing him to talk, so give me one more minute. Mr. McCormick, can you raise your hand, your virtual hand? I can see you, but for some reason, I cannot click to allow you to talk. If you could raise your virtual hand and we'll see if that helps the system. Mr. McCormick, Clifton McCormick, could you raise your virtual hand in the Zoom meeting? There we go. Let's see if that's it. That is not it. I don't see Mr. McCormick.
Okay. So, you know, I can't imagine why he would have a problem with this condition. I mean, the condition is that it's limited to school use only. It is.
Oh, I have a Ted Griffin who has raised his hand. I don't know if that is Do you want me to check with Ted Griffin to see if he's speaking for Mr. McCormick, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Or Brian, do you have any insight?
I do not know. He didn't,
Okay.
I don't know who that is.
I'll see, I will check. Ted Griffin, you're in the meeting. Are you speaking for Mr. McCormick?
Yes, I represent the owner of the school, and I was just speaking up just in case there was a technical problem with Mr. McCormick, but we support it.
And I see Mr. McCormick should be in the meeting now also, Mr. Griffin. Let me see if we can, Mr. McCormick, I think you're back in the meeting.
Yeah, I was trying to speak. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Hey, Mr. McCormick, before you get started, all we need to know is whether or not the condition that it's limited to school use only is acceptable, in your opinion.
In my opinion, and I've spoke to my client about this, yes.
Okay.
Move to approve staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the staff recommendation, and it has been seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. On roll call, Mr. Bridger.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Next case on our agenda is item 8. And this is case number 2020-0102. And this is located at 1815 East Main Street. And the application is for an urban general commercial zone deviation to building mass maximum. And this has a staff recommendation to approve.
Mr. Chair, I'm not aware of any opposition to this request.
Thank you, Mr.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Second.
And it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. On roll call, Mr. Bridger.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Okay. Passes.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a question about this case now that we've voted on it? I'll be quick.
Yes.
So this is a pretty big deviation. Would we consider this precedent for future UGC cases that we've, would we use this as precedent that we've just passed this?
I would say
I can answer that. Well, go ahead, John. I can say
I would say, I mean, for this block, yeah.
yeah, this block, we've approved, you as a planning commission have approved at St. Elmo up to like 37,000, 38,000 along St. Elmo, but John's right, along Main Street, this would set the precedent.
Okay, I mean, it's a big variance. I would just hope we would look at this in maybe even all future UGC cases that we had this, and I'll move on. Just want to make that comment.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. And if everybody could, just all of our commissioners, make sure your mics are muted, just because we're getting some feedback through the line.
Mr. Chairman, in regards to that previous case, just for clarification, isn't the footprint of the building isn't the 54,000 number? As I was reading the case, I was thinking to myself, that's a total square footage, isn't it? Isn't the exception that we just voted on related to the footprint, which would be a third of the 54,000?
The footprint is 18,000 for 3 floors, but the way it's written, it just says building mass. It does say something later on UGC about building footprint, but it's building mass, what we're trying to the variance is for. I wouldn't even call it a variance, really. It's a deviation.
But to that point, in UGC, is it the intent for the building to be 12,000 foot maximum?
That's my understanding. Unless John Field says something different, that's how we've always interpreted.
That's the footprint, yes. I've always interpreted it to be the footprint.
That's the footprint.
Any further discussion before we move on in the agenda? All right. Next case on the agenda is case 2020-0103, and this is located at 2600 East 40th Street. And this is an application to rezone from M1 manufacturing zone and UGC urban general commercial zone. Actually, M1 to UGC, and it has a staff recommendation to approve. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chair.
We do have opposition to this case.
Okay. Mr. Palmer?
I need to recuse myself.
Okay. And Mr. Schultz, I understood that there was opposition.
Yes, we do have opposition. Should be Mr. Young, I think, is in opposition to this case.
He is in the meeting.
Okay, and is the applicant present?
He is.
All right, Mr. Schultz, can you take us through this case?
Yes, this is a request to rezone from M1 to UGC. The proposed use is residential townhomes. Number of acres is 0.86. Proposed units is 20, with a density of 23.2 dwelling units per acre. It's located at 2600 block, East 40th Street. You can see it highlighted on the screen here. Here's East 40th. Here's the site here. This is a view of the site from Dodds Avenue. This is the view north of the site. The site is just to the left of this picture. This is some of the industrial young electric across the street. This is a view east of the site. This is a view south of the site. The site's this green grass field that's sitting here. And this is a view looking west of the site. And another aerial view of the site. You can see it has industrial warehousing around this property. It's currently zoned M1. To the north is M1, C2, and R2. To the south is M1, and then further south is the R2 and M2. To the east of the site is R2 and C2, and then of course further east you do have along 12th Street R1. And to the west you have M1 zoning. There is no particular zoning history on this site. However, nearby we have had some rezoning requests to rezone some properties from R2 to M1. So I'll show those on the screen where those were. So those were rezoned. This is a vacant piece of property. To the north is warehouse, industrial, office. To the south is warehouse, industrial / office. To the east is commercial. And to the west is warehousing, industrial / office. There are no steep slopes or floodplains on this property. This falls in the Rossville Boulevard Community Plan, which is adopted in 2004. The plan recommendation for this site is light and medium business mix, which is described as predominantly neighborhood and convenience commercial uses, which are like the C2 zones, as well as offices, residential, and similar uses. So the plan recommends light and medium business mix. Staff recommendation is to approve. The request to rezone to UGC allows a mix of uses and flexibility with development form, which allows for mix of uses suggested by the Rossville Boulevard plan. While the presence of multifamily residential is sparse in the area, the development form allowed in the UGC zone is compatible with surrounding land uses and the development form. So staff recommends to approve. Again, we're not approving a project. The UGC zone does allow commercial, industrial, and warehousing, as well as residential. Some of those uses in the UGC zone would be appropriate in this location. So therefore, staff recommended to approve UGC.
Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Any questions for staff before we hear from the applicant? All right. Mrs. Rennick, can you pull in the applicant?
Yes, Mr. Jones, you're in the meeting and should be able to speak.
Well, good afternoon. Hopefully everybody can hear me.
We can.
Great. So this is Alan Jones with ACE Engineering, and I'm working on behalf of the Anand Martin Foundation. They are a nonprofit organization here in Chattanooga dedicated to bringing affordable housing to those in need, and also with the focus on veterans as well. As Brian, or as the introduction kind of stated, we are looking at putting townhomes on this site. This part of town is in need of some good affordable housing, and we've got a product that we can bring to the community that brings the housing. It's kind of in a way, it's kind of a dead end street as far as traffic. So it's kind of just off Dodds, but it's got, I think from a circulation standpoint, it feeds well to the community. I did talk to a few folks over at the electric operations across the street, and they didn't see any issues as far as logistics went, as far as them accessing their site. And fortunately, our client also owns the industrial site that's immediately to the west of this project. It's a separate parcel, but he owns it as well. So we'll be able to actually do our dumpster access from the industrial site, and not only bring the dumpster into the middle of the residential development. We have met with Councilman Oglesby. I believe he may be on the call today as well. I know he is in support of this. I don't want to speak on his behalf, but I know he is in favor of it. And if we're able to bring him in to discuss his talking points, I'd like to, if we need to do that, we can do that.
I think he's having trouble getting in, Alan.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman.
I do know he supports it. I have heard that.
Yes, so we've met with him a couple times on this. So I guess I'll yield my time to the opposition, so you can hear what the concerns are.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for the applicant before we hear from the opposition? All right. Mrs. Rennick.
Mr. Young, you are in the meeting and should be able to speak, but you might need to unmute on your end. And I brought.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you, Mr. Young. Yes.
Our biggest concern, earlier the gentleman said he spoke to someone at my company. Well, he didn't speak to me, and I'm the owner. Our biggest concern is if you put a residential, in between all these businesses. I've got guys that go out at 5 o'clock in the morning. So they're in our parking lots, loading up trucks, making noise, 4:30 a.m. If they're working out of town, they're rolling in 10, 11, 12 o'clock at night. My parking lot is extremely well lit up because we've had quite a few break-ins in this area. And I just don't believe this is very compatible with everything that's around it. And when I looked at the compatibility with adjacent land uses, it even mentions in there the potential to create problems with excessive noise and lighting, and that's exactly what we're going to have. I could care less about any of the other uses. I just don't think, and this is the first I've heard that it was actually going to be townhouses. I just don't think this is a very good fit with everything. You've got a roofing company behind us that are running trucks all the time up and down this street, 40th, which is a dead-end street, basically. Mako, there's a lot of noise comes from Mako with all the body work being going on. And I do know for a fact that the gentleman that owns it's not very happy about the zoning also. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Schultz and maybe Mr. Bridger, before we go back to the applicant, second time in as many months that we've seen requests for residential in what has been currently and previously M1 areas. And this conversation took place there on the North Shore just last month. And I think their slightly different recommendation in regards to some of those concerns. I'd just be interested in hearing from staff in regards to that before we get back to the applicant.
Don, you okay?
Sure, I'll start.
I didn't know if you want me to do it.
Somebody, hey, Brian, could you mute your, okay, thank you, sorry. Oh. So essentially, I think this was the key aspect. I guess the plan, correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, recommended that mix. Is that correct?
Yes, light and medium business mix.
So again, looking at, I guess, at the zone, at the end of the day, the other thing to remember is we're approving a zone, not a use. So while they're proposing townhouses, UGC allows a lot more than that. And if you think about where we've done this in other locations, I think I'm not mistaken, in the south side, you've got a lot of this already happening with the mix. I think the difference here is, whereas the other request was an RTZ, this is a UGC zone request that we're looking at. That'll be my thoughts.
I got, what assurances do, I mean, that doesn't look like light industrial to me. That looked fairly heavy. And I mean, I know we try real hard to protect residential from industrial encroachment, but this would seem to be, how do we guarantee the people that have invested in their businesses? I don't know, but around these other places that once a residence or a densely, a dense residence project right there won't, immediately have problems with the current use. I don't see how that's good right there myself.
And Mr. Payne, to that point, if Mr. Young was asking to put his business next to a neighborhood, and we were hearing from property owners that owned houses, we might have one response. And I understand Mr. Bridger's point in regards to a zone and not a use, but the reality is that unlike most of our zones, zone and use go together. In the case of UGC, they don't. So when it's RTZ, it's always townhomes. When it's R1, it's always residential detached. And when it's O1, it's always office. In regards to UGC, we are looking and do have some obligation to look at both use and zone, because UGC has so much flexibility in it in regards to use. And if everything that were warehouse and industrial were residential, and the applicant was asking for warehouse and industrial, and that neighborhood around it was in opposition, we might hear it a little bit differently, to Mr. Payne's point. So I wonder sometimes if we aren't squeezing our M1 property down. And, at the end of the day, we're in desperate need of jobs. And, so I think it's a valid point Mr. Payne makes and the neighbor there makes. Any other comments before we hear from the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, I think I remember the case from last month too, and I'm almost thinking about the opposite, and I'd maybe like to have some staff respond to this. I think of it, and this is partly what you're trying to say, but I recognize the potential conflict, and certainly understand what Mr. Young said. I think Mr. Young's concerned that folks would move there not realizing who their neighbors were, and then they'd start to complain, and that would create problems for Mr. Young, which certainly isn't fair to Mr. Young. But don't we normally think of nuisances as those more intense zones? As I recall the case last month, I thought the comment from this board seemed strange to say that you shouldn't put residential there because of the future complaints of residents. And that seemed to make sense to me. I think it's sort of the order of it seems to me that when you have a residential zone, that's the lightest zone, and putting more intense uses in it is a nuisance to those existing individuals. But the manufacturing zone is already considered an intense zone, so putting something lighter doesn't have the same effect. It's not, the residential zone is not creating the nuisance, I don't think. And I guess I'm wondering about planning principle. And then my second comment also I don't know if this is in the Area 3 or if it's just in the Rossville Boulevard. It seemed like there was something in there that said something about Area 3, but the plan comment in the staff report clearly said that there should be a support for continuation of residential. So I recognize the potential conflicts, but it feels to me like in this case, the plan is recommending for residential, and that's why the staff is recommending for approval. John or Brian, what about this issue of nuisance and intensity of use and so on related to zoning classifications?
I think, again, at the end of the day, for me, as we look at it, I think first you got to understand, what's the zone being requested? And because as you know, projects change after zoning. And so at the end of the day, if you're stuck with the zone, I think, again, the way we look at this is, whereas other cases, an RTZ, which was adding more residential to what was already an R1, right? In terms of more folks there. In this case, I mean, I do see Mr. Payne's point here that you're still adding that residential element, which clearly could be a concern as a part of approving UGC. I think we're just looking at the broader perspective of it's a UGC zone which has a whole mix of uses. And again, if you think about what we've done in Southside, and I know it hasn't been perfect, but you know, having that mixed zone has seemed to work there. So you know, we didn't really look at it. And Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know that we really got into that whole coming to the nuisance thing. Correct me if I'm wrong in our staff deliberation.
No, it was more, but you're right. It's more about the zone dislocation. In the case that people were talking about last month was one on Riverside Drive, or RTZ across from industrial. We had mentioned that in the staff report about the nuisance issues, and Planning Commission felt differently at that time at that request.
I do think I would encourage Planning Commission to think about, it's not just this block, right? So think about the zoning pattern that you want to set for this immediate area. So I do think it's good to discuss, do we want to really try to keep this entire area more of an M1 type use, or seeing it transition to UGC over time? Because that's clearly right. What we decide here has some implications for future cases. So I think that is a good discussion for Planning Commission to have.
Well, and to that point, what's on this application is for multifamily R1. And I know you keep saying we're not approving or would not be approving a use, but what Mr. Jones has said is townhomes is different. There's a difference between multifamily and townhomes. I guess if there's no other comment, we'll hear from the applicant. Just give them an opportunity to respond to what they've heard. Mr. Jones.
Sure. Thank you. A few comments. As far as this piece of the neighborhood, if you look back at the greater zoning in this area, we do have this pocket of M1 area. You know, our client owns some of it. The Youngs, you know, have across the street, as he's documented, and even, you know, to the south of us, we've got some, you know, M1. But if you look at the greater context around it, it's kind of surrounded by, it's kind of nestled in a residential context. Even to the direct north of Young Electric, there's a duplex or R2 single family home just north of it. So the idea of mixing single family housing into quote unquote into an industrial zone, yes, that is the case, but it's also part of the greater context, which has residential in the area already. One of the comments was you know, just some crime in the area and things like that, and I think it's well documented that, you know, more eyes on the street helps reduce crime. So, you know, if we're providing townhomes in this area, it's going to help produce more eyes on the street. The client's fully aware of what he owns. He's fully aware of the operations that kind of go in this area. So, you know, the idea that, you know, that folks are running from 5 a.m. to 10 p.m., you know, he's fully aware of that situation. And plus, a lot of folks that are probably going to be moving and living in these places are working those kind of jobs as well, where they're getting up early and working in the service industry. I think that's about it. And I'll just answer any other questions if you have them.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions for?
Yeah, I have one for Mr. Jones.
Mr. Ledford.
This is outside of the zoning case, but do you think your client will be advising in full disclosure what is around to avoid the concerns by the neighbors? This is, Mr. Payne is right. This is kind of reverse of what we're normally dealing with. And I certainly wouldn't want to cause any issues to the businesses that are operating there who arguably are there first. Do you think there's any way there can be a full disclosure for folks that are moving there to ensure that they understand what they're moving to?
Oh, absolutely. I think that I think Mr. Sonny would be more than happy to fully disclose that to people, to renters that are looking to rent these townhomes. But like you said, you know, because we are ingesting into their existing fabric, so we need to, you know, be mindful and not move in and, you know, 2 years down the road, hey, you guys need to stop, you know, moving your trucks in at 5 o'clock. You're like, you know, we realize that the industry is here first. but we're helping to supply some residential use in the neighborhood. I think someone also made the comment we're in desperate need of jobs, but also I think we're also in a desperate need for affordable housing. And so this is the site that we can help bring a desperate need for affordable housing.
I'm sure that point will come up again at council with Councilman Oglesby as well. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I have a process question.
Who is that?
Barry.
Barry, sorry.
Yeah, that's all right. If it's, I guess the point's been made several times, we're approving a zone and not a project or a use. So if this were to get approved today, would the plat have to come back to us again to get if you approve something and you don't like the use, you would be going down a path. I'm asking this, would that be going down a path of costing more money, et cetera, for something that you ultimately don't want to approve? That's a question.
What we will be approving today is strictly the zone, which includes the basket of uses. So the subdivision of property would be independent of that, to my knowledge. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
And we'll be just looking at division of lots at that point. I do think this is a great discussion. I do think the bigger question to ask is the UGC zone appropriate at this location, and kind of what that means for the rest of this area. I think there's a good, and it's something to wrestle with. I think where we ended up as staff, based on the description of the plan, that the UGC zone was consistent with the policy direction of the plan, which included both heavy industrial and other types of businesses in the mix. So that's kind of where we went with it.
Mr. Bridger, I keep hearing you say that, and with all due respect, UGC was not originally intended to be our go-to residential urban zone.
Right.
Intended for exactly what you've just said a couple times, but it has turned into kind of the go-to zone for townhomes in our urban area. If we had an urban townhome zone, we may very well have a different recommendation from staff. And frankly, with what's currently being proposed, which is townhomes, RTZ would be just as appropriate. And I'm curious if staff's recommendation would be the same if it was RTZ, which is in essence what's being requested. I mean, we've been made aware of the fact that what they're wanting to do with the project is RTZ. One other comment is that currently it's warehouse industrial office surrounding this, but it's zoned M1. So if we're going to talk about zoning and not use, then we should at least list off all of the potential uses that are available with M1 that are much more of a nuisance than the current use. Because Mr. Young, who owns that M1 property, currently is using it for warehouse and office, but M1 allows for, full-blown manufacturing.
That's right.
There's a height limit on M1. So, it could be 3 or 4 stories of manufacturing right next to that. It really is a whole can of worms that gets opened with the insertion of UGC into that zone. Whereas I think what you would point out on the south side is UGC being used as a buffer between, or kind of a transition between two zones, not necessarily inserted in the midst of those zones, but that's just my personal opinion on it.
I think those are all good comments. That's why there's several bodies looking at this. And you kind of heard from our perspective.
So,
make a motion to deny.
Who did that come from? I'm sorry, I didn't see it.
Bankston.
Thank you, Commissioner Bankston. We have a motion to deny.
Second.
And that has been seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I've listened to everything that you guys have said, and it makes a lot of sense. And I completely understand your argument, but and look, I wouldn't want to live here, and I'm not sure it's a great development idea, quite frankly. But this landowner is asking for a zone that is that is down zoning and they feel like they can make it work and people can live there. They know what's around, they know the neighborhood that's around. We've got a lot of history of looking at these requests and thinking about the individual's property rights. So I'll be voting no on the motion that, I think we owe it to the individual to somewhat decide what they want to do on their property. That's it.
I agree with Mr. Farmer. I'll be voting no.
And Mr. Chairman, I do have a comment as well. Yeah, we are really in need of this affordable housing, and that's my main concern. Thank you.
Good point.
We do have a motion to deny the applicant's request, and it was properly seconded. We're going to take a roll call vote on that. If in favor of the motion, which is to deny the applicant's request, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
No.
Parks.
No.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
No.
Bailey.
No.
Ledford.
No.
Palmer.
Didn't
Palmer.
I think Mr. Palmer recused himself.
I have recused
That's right. I
myself.
apologize. Thank you. Thank you, Brian, for the heads up on that. Hyatt.
No.
Farmer.
No.
I'm gonna give you my count. I've got 1, 2,
Motion does not carry.
6-4.
Yeah.
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve, and it has been properly seconded. So just to be clear, the first motion was to deny the applicant's request for the rezoning, and that motion failed. This motion is to approve the applicant's request for rezoning to UGC, and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
I hate to do this. I know we spent a lot of time on this case. We spent so much time, we didn't ask the applicant about the staff recommendation for conditions.
There are no conditions.
This one doesn't have conditions.
Oh, I'm sorry. I've moved on. Yep, sorry.
All right. Motion to approve has been properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston.
No.
Coker.
No.
Lehman.
No.
Matthews.
Yes.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne.
No.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer. Yes, I'm sorry. He accused himself. Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
All right. Thank you, everybody. I do think that was a fantastic discussion. Thanks for bearing with us. Mr. Jones and Mr. Young, I hope that you heard the discussion and just the fact that your concerns were recognized. That'll go on to City Council and be heard next month. So.
May I ask, Chairman, if I may I just follow up on just for a question for staff? So what is the and I'll go ahead and tell you why I voted no. I do believe in sort of transition. I also believe in sort of a justification for UGC. And so my only question from a staff perspective is, why wasn't it RTZ when it's clearly all townhome, all residential? Is it because they could do either one, whether it's RTZ or UGC? And I guess that's my question, why it was requested for UGC when the use was clearly something a lot more specific than that.
Brian.
Yes, we just, the applicant, again, like John's always been saying, we look at the zone. We do not look at any other RTZ. Because, yeah, they may show the site plan today showing where application may say townhomes, but, that's not, no guarantee that's what's going to be built.
Brian, that, fair enough. I'll take that. Thank you.
All right, next case on the agenda is case 2020-0108, and this is located at 319 January, is located at 1738, 1742, and 48 East Boy Scout Road. This is an application to rezone from R1 residential zone and R5 residential zone to RTZ residential townhouse zero lot line zone. This case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions. Is there any opposition present?
Mr. Chairman, we do have opposition present. We'll need, once this case is acted on, we need to go back to item number 10 after this case. We skipped case 2020-104.
You're correct.
Well, we can go ahead and act on this if you.
Mr. Jones wants us to hear that case. I'm not sure he does today. He's probably ready to withdraw. But yes, I agree. We'll go back to that. So do we have opposition on item 13 on the agenda?
For number 13, we do. For number 10, we do not.
Okay.
So case 2020-104, we do not have opposition in the meeting.
All right.
And that case has approved with conditions.
All right.
2020-104.
Can we get the applicant on the line and we'll cover it?
Mr. Jones, you're in the meeting, so just you should, when the chair's ready, you'll be able to speak.
Is it Mr. Jones on case 2020-0108?
They went back to 104.
We're going, yes. I think Karen, the chair wants to go ahead and finish 108.
I'm sorry. I will.
Sorry about that, everybody.
Nope.
I was taking notes when we were doing roll call, and I moved halfway down the agenda because of all the motions. So y'all are the ones responsible for me screwing this up. We are on case 2020-0108.
And Brian, I don't have a applicant's name for this one. Do you?
It's just a company name, 319 LLC. They did not provide who the speaker was.
If the applicant for case 108 is in the meeting, if you could raise your virtual hand, please. Okay. I have Alex Spears, which Mr. Spears, I had you in opposition.
He may be the applicant.
Okay. Let's allow Mr. Spears to, let me just confirm. Mr. Spears, are you in opposition or an applicant for the case 108?
I'm the applicant.
Okay, Mr. Spears, sorry for the confusion.
Yeah.
Mr. Spears, this is Chairman Collier. If you could just quickly indicate whether or not you're okay with these conditions that have that we've got a single family detached residential use only.
Yes, I'm okay with them.
All right, I'd entertain a motion.
Approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Aye.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Mr. Bridger. Back up in our agenda, I previously skipped 10, item 10, which is 2020-0104. And this is located at 3803-3715 Cleo Avenue. And this is an application to rezone M1 manufacturing zone to R1 residential zone and C2 convenience commercial zone to UGC urban general commercial zone. In this case has a staff recommendation to approve with conditions.
Mr. Chairman, I recuse myself on this case as well.
Mr. Palmer has recused himself. And do we have opposition?
We do not have opposition in the meeting.
I have a question.
Mr. Payne.
This is out of ignorance, I guess, but we just spent 30 minutes on the case prior or two back talking about we only look at a zone when we're going to UGC. This is in essence the same thing, except we're looking at the zone, but we got conditions placed on this UGC. Why do we do that on this one if we're only looking at zones when we go to UGC?
That would be if there's, again, a nuisance created as a part of rezoning this property to what's there. Now, I think you do have a point, Commissioner Payne, about if there's a concern about residential being on that UGC property, you could have said, hey, to avoid any potential nuisance concerns to the surrounding M1, to say, you know what, we would have no residential in that UGC, right? So the question in this case, if you got somebody who's wanting to rezone this to UGC, you got R1 surrounding it. And so to ensure that it's compatible, particularly with R1 next door, the staff is recommending not single family, but residential only. Is that correct, Brian?
That's correct. Residential uses only, which is UGC townhomes in essence. And then limiting building height on those R1, which is on Cleo Avenue, which is primarily a residential neighborhood.
UGC carries 4 stories, right?
It does. So we're limiting this from the 2.5 stories to 35 feet on those 2 parcels that front Cleo Avenue. No conditions on Rossville Boulevard.
But just to be clear for the record, in future cases, I think Commissioner Payne raised a good point. If the commission had concern about nuisances of another case, you could have said rezone it to UGC, but not residential. Which I know is not what they were proposing in terms of concept, but again, if you're approving the zone, if you're concerned about that residential being a nuisance or affect adjacent businesses, I mean, I think that's something you would look at as far as a condition for a zone.
Well, I just consistency. We just talked about all we look at is a zone. All we look at is a zone when it's UGC, because there's multiple uses in that zone, and then we go one case later and that's not what we look at. We looked at what the use inside that zone is.
I see his point.
Okay.
I see his point. Good
All
point.
right. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but I think it's an interesting question too. I see it as a matter of intensity. I think the previous, you had a more intense zone of manufacturing already existing, and so the insertion of residential was with lesser intensity than that zone. Therefore, the staff recommendation, I guess I'm putting words in Bridger's mouth, but it was basically the opposite. In this case, we got mostly single family housing that's existing, and so we're putting multifamily housing, which is a more intense zone than what's there, and therefore there's conditions being put on it to mitigate that potential nuisance. That's the way I see it. It seems to make sense to me for what it's worth.
Hey, John, when's that zoning assessment starting?
Well,
meeting with the team next week. Meeting with them next week.
Next week?
No, we started the zoning assessment 2 months ago when we made a recommendation to City Council that RTZ change so that some of these problems wouldn't present themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Duly noted, Chairman.
Is the applicant on the line? Mr. Jones, can you tell us what your response to these conditions is?
Yes, we're perfectly fine with these conditions to respect the lesser density of the lesser intense use of the R1 on the adjacent properties.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. What's the will of the commission?
Move to approve with conditions.
Second. Motion to approve with conditions. And Mr. Farmer, did you second that? Yeah, I think you did.
I did.
Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Sorry. Yes.
Matthews,
Aye.
Parks,
Aye.
Payne,
Yes.
Maybe,
Aye.
Bailey,
John, I'm so sorry, and Commissioner, Chairman, my internet went out when the motion was made. I want to make sure I know what I'm voting on. What's the motion?
motion to approve with conditions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ledford,
Yes.
Palmer,
Recused.
Hughes, I'm sorry, Hyatt,
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next case on the agenda is item 14. It's 2020-0109, and this is located at 7417 McDaniel Lane. This is an application to rezone from A1 Agricultural District to R1 Residential Single Family District. Staff, is there any opposition?
There's no opposition on the call, and the applicant is present.
Motion
to approve.
Well, can we hear from the applicant real quick on these conditions, if that's all right? Oh, we do have a motion. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt that. Mr. Bankston, was it you with the motion?
It was, yes.
And then, was there a second?
Matthews.
Mr. Matthews seconded that. I'd like to hear from the applicant before we have any discussion. We've got conditions on this. Is that Mr. Goodwin?
Mr. Goodwin, you're in the meeting and should be able to speak.
Mr. Goodwin, can you hear us?
Mr. Goodwin, you may need to unmute the mic on your end.
Mr. Goodwin, what we need to know is whether or not you're familiar with these conditions. Can you speak to those?
Okay. Hello.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Goodwin.
Yes. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I've submitted a plan that's surrounded mainly by R1 zoning, but it's zoned farmland agricultural. I'm asking for the obvious change of zoning from the next level up to R1 zoning. When I submitted this conservative plan of 77 lots, when I could have submitted something a lot higher, around 100 lots, anyone living in and around the surrounding neighborhood in this area knows this property oh so well as a dump site. You can find old tires, mattresses, construction supplies, household trash, construction trash, debris trash all around on this site. I'm taking a train wreck of a situation and transforming it into something Optimus Prime would be proud of. The people living in this neighborhood have seen this condition for over 15 years of this dump site undeveloped area. It's time for a change, for a positive for the Hamilton County area. I'm dropping the request for the PUD and just asking for a straight up R1 zoning. And that's it. Just, I want to waive all the conditions so be able to just do R1 zoning on it.
And just remind everybody the proposed residential density is 4.5 per acre. Basic residential density is 2 dwelling units per acre. And
I can't hear.
Is to approve with conditions that be limited to 3 dwelling units.
Mr. Chairman, could the applicant remove?
I removed the applicant from the meeting. I think he was unable to mute his mic. I'm sorry. I just had to remove him ability to talk. So he's in the meeting if you need me to bring him back.
Okay.
Oh, well, he is not okay with the 3 units per acre limit. Is that right?
That's right.
In my understanding, he wants to withdraw the next case, which is case 2020-110, which is the PUD.
Brian, what's the density of Meadow Stream adjoining?
It's 2. It's a bigger development.
Meadow Stream is only 2 units per acre.
Yeah, it's pretty big.
There's another one though, just north of it, you can see, and it's extremely dense.
That one up there, I believe we had it conditioned at 3.5 billions per acre, the one to the north.
I'm very familiar with this piece of property, and he is correct. It's been a eyesore forever.
For sure.
And there's been all kinds of problems with this piece of property. I move to approve R1 with a
Second.
4.5 instead of 3.
Okay, so hold on just a second. We have a motion from Mr. Bankston earlier to approve, and I'm assuming that was with conditions, and that was seconded. And we hadn't yet heard from the applicant, so we heard from the applicant that they did not want a density cap on this.
I'll amend my motion to include the 3.
There is a density cap, right, with R1. I mean, he can't do whatever he wants to. It just doesn't have that 3 units per acre density.
Correct. Correct. It can go up to 4 to 5 based on the minimum lot size in R1.
Okay.
Y'all really do make chairing this meeting so much fun. Just so we're clear, we have a motion, and I think what Mr. Bankston just did was amend his motion to do what, Mr. Bankston?
He withdrew his motion, so my motion is on the floor now.
Is that correct? Correct, Mr. Bankston?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I second his motion.
All right, Mr. Payne, thank you. Mr. Bankston, thank you. We do have a motion to approve the rezoning with no condition, and that was properly seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Yes.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, everybody. The next case on the agenda is case 2020-0110, and this is the same property. And I believe when we just had our applicant with us,
He wanted to withdraw.
he did say he wanted to withdraw it, but I just want to hear it in reference to this case. If we could, just Mr. Goodwin, is it you want to withdraw this request?
Yeah, on the pod, yes.
Okay.
Move to withdraw.
We have a motion to withdraw,
Second.
and it has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Bankston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Sorry, yes.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Mr. Schultz, I'm with you. The next case on the agenda is mandatory referral 2020-0097, and this is 1700 block of Green Hill Road. Is our applicant with us yet?
Yes, Ms. Tony has joined us via the computer, so I think we should be okay.
Ms. Tony, we have a staff recommendation to deny your request and approve other. Are you familiar with what it is that they've recommended here?
Ms. Tony, you're in the meeting and should be able to speak. You might need to unmute on your end. Ms. Tony?
Mr. Schultz?
Yeah, I can tell you the difference. What the applicant.
Hold on, before, just real quick. We vote this up or down, it goes to council.
Yes, it does. Ultimately goes to CDOT for their review, then ultimately on city council.
So if we could help Ms. Tony understand that this will go on to council.
I believe she's aware of what staff recommendation is. And actually her site plan, which she submitted, complies with the staff recommendation. So what she's asking for is, I know it's hard to see, this little blue outline area. It's a really odd shaped right of way. There's no radius. She has a fence she's going to put up. And so she's asking for a little 10-foot by 10-foot section of the right of way to be abandoned. CDOT and staff looked at it. We think go ahead and clean this up, make it more of a pie shaped, which is on the site plan here. Go ahead and approve more than what she's requesting.
Okay.
Now, 1721, which is to the south, I did receive a letter from an attorney who represents this property owner and wishes to have his email read for the record, if that's okay.
Yes, please.
We represent Sharon and Wayne Miller, who live at 1721 Green Hill Drive. As to the case number 2020-97, our clients object to any abandonment of right-of-way to the owners of 1719 Green Hills Drive, the Tonys. Any abandonment approved should not give the Tonys any right-of-way in front of 1721 Green Hills Drive, Lot 3 on Plat 21, page 67. Our clients indicate that if the abandonment is approved, that the shared property line with the property at 1719 Green Hill Drive should be extended so as to not allow the Tonys to have property in front of the property of our clients. So basically, they don't want they want to keep that right of way open in front of what's owned by 1721. This closure does not add or give Tony's property that are in front of the Millers.
All right. I'd entertain a motion to
Move to approve the staff recommendation.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Farmer. We have a motion to approve staff's recommendation. It has been properly seconded. Any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye on roll call.
Bangston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks. Parks.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Yes.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Real quick, before we cover the amendments and resolutions, is there any public comment on non-agenda items?
We did not have anyone sign up in advance to do that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And can I get approval of the Planning Commission minutes of August 10th?
Motion to approve.
Second.
And is there any discussion? All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bangston.
Yes.
Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Aye.
Bailey.
Aye.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, and then backing up and covering the amendments and resolutions, we have a resolution to review the revised Area 3 Historic River to Ridge Area Land Use Plan. Mr. Bridger, can you take us through these modifications that have come through council?
Sure. As you recall back in, I think it was back in May or June, you all had approved the Area 3 plan with certain modifications, which you see on the screen. There were 9 in total. Council reviewed those, had a public hearing, and then took action in July to adopt the Area 3 plan with 7 of the 9 modifications recommended by Planning Commission. The one that they did not approve was modification number 5, which took the natural resources overlay off the place types map. And then modification number 6, what they did is they basically adopted a little bit different language. So Brian, can you go to the next slide? It shows, again, you can see the original PC proposed modification, which you read that last sentence, that's the most important part. It says place types will only be used to define a zone and will not be considered in evaluating a site plan or any site related conditions. What council adopted was that staff recommended conditions will be limited to addressing a public safety or nuisance created by the rezoning request as defined by state law. And so basically, in terms of process, I think what your role in this is as a body is to either approve, not approve, or take no action.
Okay, and just so that the commission understands, we can approve, deny, or take no action, but does this go back to council?
The only case it goes to council if there's basically there's not approval.
But we cannot further modify it.
That's correct.
It's up, down, or no action.
That's right. Yes, sir.
What's the ramifications of no action?
No action, because it still stands as approved by council, is my understanding.
Yeah.
And the same if we vote no, it still stands?
Well, council will then need to take it up at their next meeting to adopt it one last time.
And I think, Barry, to your point, if you were to vote no, or we were to vote no on it, then it would be fair for it to go back to council with the reason why, so that maybe council could take that back under consideration. So with that being said, I'll entertain a motion.
Based on that conversation, I would like to say that we did have a very extensive public hearing. So when you say that, I want you to understand that we did have a extremely heavy participation in that public hearing, which led to those modifications.
Mr. Ledford, I hate that you are the council representative sometimes, because I feel like you might take the punches for council.
I do.
But I want to ask a really easy question that's yes or no. Did the public show up and say that they wanted the language natural resources in the Area 3 plan?
Yes, and I believe there are some folks on this call that would verify that.
And were any of them property owners of property?
They're even better, sir, along with that, community leaders.
Okay. Mrs. Rennick, do we have anybody on the call that wishes to speak in regards to this?
We had Dr. Everlina Holmes sign up in advance to speak. I do not see her on the list. Dr. Holmes, if you're in the meeting, if you could raise your virtual hand. We don't have anyone on the phone, which is sometimes how people get lost, Mr. Chair. So if we can give Dr. Holmes one more minute to raise her hand so I could unmute her mic. Mr. Chair, I don't see a virtual hand raised at this point.
Thank you. And Mr. Bridger, if you could remind me with the current map that represents the Area 3 plan, is there private property that's held by private individuals that is currently designated as natural resource and steep slope on the map?
Yes.
And Councilman Ledford, did you hear from those individuals who own property?
I do not recall if we heard specifically from them.
Okay.
I do not recall.
All right. What's the will of the commission?
I move no action.
I'll second.
We have a motion for no action, and that has been properly seconded. Any discussion?
Can you clarify again? I probably should have asked this before I seconded it, but no action does not require, that would make this item closed, correct? Does not require that it return to council?
That is correct.
Maybe for my own curiosity, in relation to Mr. Chairman's previous point, John, can you summarize what the National Resources Overlay does, perhaps regulatorily, currently in the plan?
It's strictly a policy. It's not regulatory. So when there is a rezoning request or a PUD, what we're looking at is basically how does it balance development with conservation in those areas. So that's all it is a policy. So it provides another point of information when we have a rezoning request.
Any further discussion?
May I get some clarification? Are you saying with a PUD, John, or any rezone?
Any rezoning.
Mr. Payne, are you talking?
Talking to myself.
Okay.
Sorry.
All right. We have a motion for no action, and it has been seconded. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Bankston.
I don't think he's with us any longer.
Okay. Coker.
Yes.
Lehman.
Yes.
Matthews.
Aye.
Parks.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yes.
Bailey.
Yes.
Ledford.
Yes.
Palmer.
Yes.
Hyatt.
Yes.
Farmer.
He's off the line now.
Got so that no action.
All right. Motion carries.
Mr. Chairman, may I ask a question?
Ms. Hyatt, yes, ma'am.
Is there a way when this happens at the city council level on an important item like this, not on every single case? I'm not clear about why they decided what they decided. Is there a way for us to get some information as to what the decision-making was about?
Well, that's part of the public hearing process.
I'm sorry, say again?
That would be in the public hearing process, I would think.
I'm just saying, it seems like, you know, if we deliberate and do all this work and then it goes to council and they're like, nah. I mean, I feel like there should be some greater understanding of what their reasoning was on paper. Maybe not a huge thing, but, you know, because I think we're all a little bit wondering what's going on.
Mr. Chairman, if I may comment.
Mr. Maybe, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Kind of, and I'm not sure if I'm coming from the exact same place that that Mrs. Hyde is, but something that I personally thought would be helpful in, and I think there's been a couple cases today that have kind of highlighted it, is, you know, oftentimes when we have cases come through and they move on to the county commission and city council, you know, we lose track of them after they move through our body. And I think something to me personally that would be helpful is if in the scenarios where the council or the commission has a different ruling than what our body did, if we could just get a bullet point list of those cases and what the differences were, I think would be helpful feedback to me. And I was glad Ms. Hyatt brought that up, and kind of wondering if any of the other commissioners felt the same way, and if the staff thinks that that's something that they could do.
Sure, we can do that. I think I want to answer for John, but we had talked about that once before, especially on those larger cases where we have a large discussion on, maybe once a quarter, giving you guys an update, you know, where it stands, where the project is in the development process, and, you know, you as a planning commission struggled with the conditions and maybe something's not built, or whatever that looks like, some kind of quarterly report back to the planning commission on things you all do see.
I think, Brian, the only nuance there, I think, is sometimes we might miss the why. And so I think what we can start doing, Councilman Ledford, between you and me, is maybe when we know that there's a motion that's clearly different from what PC recommended, is maybe ask if it could be a comment as part of the discussion of the motion, or whatever, about we are recommending this a different outcome for PC for these reasons. We can talk through that.
Yeah, and that makes sense, because what Chairman said is correct. You know, I have a unique role on here, as does Commissioner Bankston, in that, you know, we're discussing this at the next level. And so this information is, you know, in us. We're talking with folks, members of the community, and we're getting that feeling. And, you know, when it comes down to it, as our decision, you know, we got to remember who we work for. And we work for the people that elected us. We work for the community. And when we need to listen to them and try to find that balance and do the right thing within our zones. But it is a disadvantage. I can see where the commission is kind of, you know, they're not following this case. Every case that goes forward from here, when it comes to the city, I will be walking through the entire next month, talking with my colleagues representing those districts. So it's like I can see where the frustration and the confusion comes in, but there's a lot that comes into that as far as in listening to the community as well.
Thank you.
Chairman, can I respond to that?
Sorry.
With all due respect, yes, it is your constituents, but also the 12 of us are kind of, I guess, appointed or asked to review this and look at citizen stuff and look at what the full-on plans are, what the work of the planners have been. And I just want to mention back to the very first thing we talked about, we didn't get a second on something from Commissioner Mitchell or Councilman Mitchell because of some really innocuous reason. And so I just feel like that there needs to be some back and forth communication other than like Ethan said, you always saying, well, this or that. I don't think that this level necessarily should be discounted like I feel sometimes it is, because I often hear, well, they're our customers and we have to, you know, do what they say. What is the point of doing all these all these plans if your customers or your constituents, you know, don't come out in the beginning, but then come out when something is in their neighborhood and say they don't want it? It just seems a little twisted to me. That's all. I'll be quiet now.
Well, Councilman Ledford, you sure do take those punches well, and we appreciate you being here and you know, helping us better understand what's happening at council. And you know, Commissioner Bankston's done the same thing for us with the county commission. So you know, it is helpful to get that feedback, and you know, you do take, you know, you take the brunt of any frustration that there is with council or the commission, and you do that well and represent them well. So thank you for that.
I think a lot lately, that's for sure, from all angles.
I do have the reason I was talking to myself is something along this line. I want a little clarification to understand what I think I heard earlier about the case you're talking about. What was that we submitted to council that they did not get a second on?
It was all the changes to RTZ.
And the accusation is we made those changes to RTZ.
But better than that, Barry, it's that I mean, if I understood it correctly, we unanimously approved those changes to RTZ, and that the entire commission had one particular developer in mind when we made those changes. Is that right, Councilman Ledford?
No, I would not say that the planning commission that was laid at your feet at all. What you did was not, that was not the case. The case was if you want to go back and review the video, you're welcome to. A situation was brought by a council member with great conviction that put a lot of question into play by everyone, which is why you didn't get a second. You have to understand what the second does. The second opens up conversation. Well, hoping something might come forward. It was a very strong accusation that made, I think, the case for no second.
A strong accusation of what?
I'd like for you to go back. I'm not going to play referee with you, Barry.
I'm not Here's the bottom line.
If you want to know, you can call Councilman Mitchell and you can get full details of his accusation, because I can tell you to date, we have not been given any details other than it was a very strong accusation that warranted or qualified for a no second due to the conditions that were presented to us at the time by a council member.
Mr. Bridger, can you elaborate on what happened at council since this has come up?
Sure. I spoke with Councilman Mitchell on the phone last week, and I think what he shared with me, and it was based on a conversation he had with some of his constituents who had concerns that this was really not benefiting the city as a whole, but a developer. And so based on that feedback he received from his constituents, he didn't feel like he could support the second reading of the ordinance. But my understanding was that that was not necessarily intended to mean that the rest of the council should vote no. But as you know, communication, you're right there on the fly. Councilman Ledford knows when you hear something for the first time, that can be
it can be jarring, John. It can be extremely jarring.
That's right. So what I've talked to Councilman Ledford about this, and I'm going to get ready to have a conversation with Chairman Henderson, is if that's the case, and then, by Robert's Rules of Order, the voting majority could bring it back up for reconsideration. It's my understanding. So I think I would like to entertain at least another kind of the voice of Planning Commission that would help as I follow up with the legislative bodies. I'm sure Darren, Councilman Ledford would like that as well. Kind of, again, just a reminder of how you see the goal of this zone. I mean, certainly I would say, and I shared this during the briefing, that this keeps us from zoning the middle of neighborhoods, UGC and R and C. But again, I just think it might be helpful if you all wanted to, again, as a collective body, to let me know your thoughts on what you would like to see adopted. I'll certainly convey that, as well as Councilman Ledford, to the rest of council.
Let me add one thing to that as well, because I was at that meeting at City Council. It was also at the same council meeting where we had talked about the zoning code assessment. One of the things that was brought up is, why now do the RTZ when we're fixing to go through a zoning code assessment? That was also a concern.
I think the short answer to that question is a zoning code assessment may or may not result in any changes to the zoning code, and it's a lengthy process. And we just did Area 3. That's why it has nothing to do with a particular developer. It has everything to do with the fact that in the Area 3 plan, there are very specific recommendations that we don't have a zone for. So we're looking at this gaping hole between Area 3, which is what we've just taken no action on, and our current zoning code. And we've had tons and tons of hours talking about Area 3 and this gap between, the recommendations for residential development in Area 3 and our current zoning code options. Planning Commission makes a recommendation for staff to review that. I think the question that Planning Commission has right now is, what does it take to get that back on City Council's agenda? And if somehow through that process we need to be better represented there, such that council understands why that happened, what was driving that, the number of times we see UGC cases for the sole purpose of single family and single family attached and should be probably detached. If they could see the problems that we're having here, that we're having to sort out even today, what does it take to get that back on the agenda at City Council?
So the short answer to that is any member on the prevailing side of the vote can move to bring and reconsider that item. So if that's what we're going to talk to Chairman Henderson about offline after this meeting, is probably more of a written explanation as to what the intent was, and then move forward from that point. But any member, to answer your question, any member on the prevailing side. So I was on the prevailing side because there was no second. And so any member on the prevailing side can, the only member who couldn't bring it up technically would be Councilman Oglesby because he made the motion. But anybody else outside of that. John, I'm hitting it on all cylinders?
That's great.
I think the intent, I'm sorry, John, but I think the intent of the motion is important, but I think what wasn't the intent is more important. There was no intent, no discussion, at least we got 12 people that voted unanimously, and I can assure you, no, at least as far as I know, nobody made a vote based on any one developer, that's for sure.
It was definitely a unique and jarring situation, Commissioner. And we just, I don't know how else to say it other than we're looking at a rectifying or another solution to it.
What I can do, Chairman, is I think your idea is a good one about having a rep from, if somebody, I can find out once we know that when we get with Councilman Ledford and we confirm that it's back on the agenda, I mean, I was certainly going to reiterate the messages I conveyed at the committee meeting, but I think having a planning commissioner on standby might not be a bad idea.
Sure. Chairman, would that be something you'd be willing to do?
Well, what, switch roles with you and take bullets for planning commission? Yeah, that sounds like a blast. Sign me up.
Oh, you've taken them as a developer. Come on.
I would be happy to do that. I mean, I feel very passionate about the issue, you know, in part because of the fact that we have seen it now for 3 years, 4 years, consistently as we've started to develop these more and more infill properties and the problems that we have with RTZ. And so I'd be happy to be a part of those discussions. I do have a hard stop here at 3:30, so I, for one, have to go. I'm not trying to cut the conversation short. I'm just saying.
We're good. John, we'll talk offline.
That's it.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman.
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Matthews.
Yeah, one really quick item. I'd like to ask if we could have staff to have a new look at the urban and suburban infill rules. That's a real eyesore. I would prefer it not to exist, but you know, I'm sure that maybe there's some modifications that can be done to that to keep that in. Thank you.
I'll just follow that. Dave, you could just shoot us an email to kind of develop that a little, just kind of, and we'd be happy to get back with you on that.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for your hard work today. I do think there have been some really great dialogue, and I, for one, appreciate it. And I'm sure those who've been on the call do as well, even though some of that's more difficult than maybe it normally would be. So thank you. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Okay, so we have motions and it has been seconded.
I just have one announcement, just real quickly. You'll be getting an email this week on a rescheduled workshop they're supposed to have in August. Just look at your email and you'll see everything you need to know.
All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Everybody, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Aye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.